Kevin, it is so good to see you. I sure appreciate you taking the time. We obviously worked together a long time ago during your days at Stericycle and mine at Career Builder. So appreciate you coming full circle here and joining this call. This is the podcast of CCR Search. We are a recruiting firm focused on sales and marketing, finance and accounting and construction roles. I have with me today Kevin O'Connor. Kevin is currently the COO of Scaling Up Coaches. A little background on Kevin: after graduating cum laude from Philadelphia University, now Jefferson University, with a BS in Human Resource Management, Kevin began his career at MBNA America. Fun fact, we both actually worked there, I think even at the same time in 1999. I was just a cold caller. You got promoted up to assistant vice president over time though. And then in 2006, Kevin joined Appletree Answers, a boutique call center and answering service business headquartered in Wilmington, Delaware. Kevin was the chief operating officer with Appletree Answers, where he helped lead the company through unprecedented revenue growth, 300% profitability, 5 times the industry average. And he did that by implementing a world-class culture, reducing voluntary turnover, and a high-touch boutique customer contact center organization from over 100% to under 20%. During his tenure, the organization won the Why We Love Our Workplace Award from the Great Places to Work Institute and was named as a best place to work in Delaware twice. After Appletree Answers was acquired by the Fortune 1000 business Stericycle in 2012, he served as Vice President of Human Resources for North America, overseeing HR, employee relations, and talent acquisition processes for over 11,000 team members. He also implemented multitudes of processes to drive employee engagement across diverse business units. In 2018, Kevin joined a Line 5 based in Westchester, Pennsylvania, as Vice President of Coaching and Consulting, where he coached mid-market companies to implement the scaling up process. The companies he worked with achieved average profitability growth of over 132% year over year, which is quite impressive. And then in his career, Kevin has extensive experience in leading and working with successful executive teams to implement high engaging cultures, double-digit revenue and profitability growth, and has led over 30 successful acquisition implementations in both public and private organizations. A Philadelphia native, Kevin still lives in the greater Philadelphia area with his wife of 18 years and 2 sons and their chocolate lab Guinness. And he enjoys coaching youth basketball and baseball, spending time at the Jersey Shore in the summers, and, as you mentioned, unapologetic Philly sports fan. So pretty good luck to you there. That's all I'll say with that one.
Yeah, it's a great time to be a fan around here.
Yeah, that's true. You got me there. And then, of course, you're currently COO of Scaling Up Coaches, and you've joined us today to really talk about, what's happening in the current economic environment from an HR standpoint. I'll be really excited to jump into those topics. But before we do, why don't you tell us a little bit about Scaling Up Coaches and what you're up to today?
Yeah, thanks, Dan, and thanks for having me. And yeah, we're really excited. As we speak today, we are getting ready for Game 4 of the World Series tonight. So yeah, looking forward to it. So yeah, so Scaling Up was really the process, and derived from a book called Mastering the Rockefeller Habits, which is celebrating its 20-year anniversary, written by a man by the name of Vern Harnish. And we really picked that process up when I was at Appletree. And so what Scaling Up Coaches is a group of over 200 coaches worldwide, Dan. Then essentially what those coaches do is they work with mid-market companies, growth-oriented companies around the world, and help them to implement this system in their organizations. And the system is just designed on getting 4 decisions right. No matter what business, no matter what industry you're in, you need to get the right people, have the right strategy, execute that strategy, and then have the cash to fuel that growth. And so what we're best known for is our one-page strategic plan, which literally gets the entire company on the same page. And so I'm very grateful to not only lead that organization and that team, but also work with clients myself who implement that scaling up process. So we love it. We think it's a great system for growth companies.
That's great. I love the one page. I think that, I recently opened up like some new bank accounts, and I was sent a virtual document or whatever, a DocuSign that was literally 140 pages long, and you can't get anything done or read anything in that, and it's got to be simple, and it seems like you guys have a really sound recipe that's worked extremely well for your clients. So
Yeah, I mean, it's a process that literally tens of thousands of companies around the world have used to scale to the billions in revenue, have unbelievable exits, build unbelievable cultures. So it's great to be a part of that community.
that's great. Well, I'm excited to dive in here. First question of the day, lots going on in the economic environment. We have inflation. We have interest rates already at 7% in real estate and creeping up. It looks like the Feds are going to raise it again. And we have layoffs happening all around us. You and I have both been through a few recessions in our careers, sadly, but it happens. And I'm curious to know your thoughts on what companies are doing right versus wrong at the moment. So if you have the crystal ball, pull it out, please.
Yeah, if I had that, I'd probably be doing something different, right? But it's interesting. I think all companies right now, Dan, that we're seeing are just fatigued, right? I mean, you get out of the pandemic, we had a really good growth opportunity, and now here we are talking about a recession. Feels like just a couple months later. I think what makes this topic unique for now for companies we work with and for all of us is and you mentioned it, the I word, the inflation. So inflation's at its highest point in 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
So quite frankly, there's not a lot of executives or leaders that are around that saw that, right? So whether or not we ultimately go into a recession, as they want to call it, now it's defined, it's sort of not irrelevant. It's irrelevant in the fact that the inflation that we're experiencing now is really unprecedented for most people in this kind of professional lifetime. So the first piece of advice, I talk to companies all the time is, if you have someone that was around in an executive leadership position, in late 70s, early 80s, seek them out, find out what they did, learn from people that have been through it. But what we're finding with a lot of our clients and what our coaches are working with clients is, number one, making sure they have a healthy balance sheet. It's funny you mentioned MBNA. One of my first lessons I learned as a lender there, I was on the phone with a customer, and he gave me probably the best cash advice I've ever received in my life, whether that be personally or professionally. And that was, get cash when you can, not when you have to. So when we say be in a good cash position, have a healthy balance sheet, access to cash. That could be, a line of credit, that could be cash reserves, but you want to have a healthy balance sheet, especially as you kind of go into an uncertain economic environment. The other things I think that really smart companies are doing is they're continuing to invest in their people, especially their high performers. You talk about, the quit and stay and all the things that we're hearing going on around the people. And despite the fact that we're talking about a recession, the job market is incredibly strong. And it's still, the companies we work with are still looking for people. It's still hard to find people. So continuing to invest in their people, especially their high performers, following the scaling up methodology or what successful companies do is they have effective meeting and communication rhythms. They have clear data on their customers and their employees, so they can kind of see the trends ahead. In the book Great by Choice by Jim Collins, he talked about this concept called return on luck. And what they found with all the companies they studied that were successful was, one company didn't have especially bad luck or good luck. It was what they did with that quote unquote good or bad luck. You look back at the pandemic, right? That was a boon for people like Instacart, delivery services. So if you're positioned at the right time, it can really be advantageous. And the other example I'll give you is, back to your point on some of the recessions that we've lived through, was the most recent being the 2007, 2008 banking crisis. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned Appletree and our growth. We were growing largely by acquisition. When that happened, we were really concerned because all these banks were failing, and our main financial institution that we work with wanted to meet with us, and we thought, well, this isn't good. Well, here, as it turned out, they were in a really strong position. They had not gotten into TARPs or anything like that. And what they did was they came to us and said, hey, we feel like this is going to be an opportunity for you. we're going to give you a special line of credit just for acquisitions, because we financed our acquisitions 100% on bank credit, bank debt. There's going to be some opportunities, but you got to go out and spend the money. Now, what we didn't know was obviously the government had got involved and done some capital injections and really promoted these banks to do this, but we were able to really leverage that as our takeoff point. So in many respects, that was a very unlucky event for many companies, but for us, it was sort of a lucky event. But because we have the systems, processes in place, we're able to use that as a catapult for growth. So that's the biggest advice I would give companies now is, what are you in position to do based upon what the market tells you? And do you have the cash to be able to invest to do it?
Great advice. And, it's actually a perfect segue because, a lot of these companies are laying off people and they're good people, right? This is not, hey, these are underperformers. I read a story the other day. An individual had spent 9 years at HubSpot, right? Rode the wave, did an incredible job, took the leap to X company for 6 months and then first in, first out. And now she's given a couple weeks severance, a few weeks of benefits, and she's in a tough spot. And, ultimately you and I both were recruiting individually in our own right for Stericycle. And remember how difficult that was just in general, just to go get candidates, and the employment brand was such an investment and so important. What do you think will kind of be the outcomes for these companies that in my personal opinion are kind of torching these people? And if there's a quick bounce there, that those names will be remembered.
Yeah, you can't hide anymore, Dan, right? Social media, Glassdoor, LinkedIn, as a brand, you just cannot hide. And I think companies that are true to their values and look, stuff happens, right? Companies misalign strategy, or they don't execute, or they run out of cash. But how you treat people on the way out versus how you treat them on the way in is really going to say a lot about your brand. So I think the companies that, I hate to say it, in a bad spot, do it the right way and treat their folks with respect. And I've been fortunate enough to be part of companies that did go through some tough times, but I think really went overboard to treat these folks well on their way out and really assist them with landing another opportunity, both from a financial perspective and just from a preparedness perspective. I think those brands will carry. To your point on, hey, sorry, it didn't work out and kind of see you later. That's going to be tough to overcome. There's no price on your brand and your culture. And it takes a long time, or can take a long time. We've seen companies really turn around a culture pretty quick, but it can take a long time to build that brand, but seconds to destroy it, right? So I think companies who are values-based, in good times and bad, that communicate upfront with their team members, be totally honest with them, will succeed in the long run. And people that kind of take shortcuts and do it the wrong way, I think I forget the name of the company, and maybe I shouldn't out them, but they did like a mass layoff over Zoom at one point. And this was post-pandemic.
Better,
right?
Better mortgage.
It
right?
might have been. And I just wonder, what went through the mind? Like, who in that room didn't stand up and go, wait, we have a core value of X. I mean, I would hope there's some value pertaining to how you treat people with respect, but nobody spoke up and said, hey, we have a value that's this, and are we really living that? And so I'm a huge proponent of core values, a huge proponent of core purpose. We teach it in this methodology, and the companies that are true to those, I think, will large. I'll say this, Dan. I have seen companies be successful with poor cultures. I've yet to see a company with a great culture not be successful.
Yeah, that's really well said. It's really interesting, especially as we say culture. As I go and recruit, and I'm recruiting for a couple sales roles right now, and I'm scared to even say culture. I'm like, these are the benefits and 401, and there's great comp and quickly growing, and then culture. Because it's such a turnoff. They're like, oh, don't go start telling me about the family environment, because that didn't go great for me at my last company. And it's interesting. I think it's a tough thing to pull off. And you're absolutely right. Like those companies that do it right. I also historically worked with American Family, and I was so impressed because they had a realignment. They were extremely upfront with everybody way in advance. They gave people something like 6 months to figure out new roles internally. They help them segue out of the company if that's the direction they wanted to go, but they have plenty of opportunity within the company. And they just treated people right, that even the people that left the organization had nothing but great things to say about the organization. And like you said, right, you burn through your cash, or you run into bumps in the road as all of a sudden the market's turned, and we have, you torch these employees. I don't know how some of these brands will ever recover from that.
Yeah, I mean, look, like, do you want to work with a company that does that from a recruiting perspective? Probably not. A, because it doesn't align with your values, and B, it's going to be a really difficult job to fulfill. So not only do you ruin your brand with your prospective employees, but you ruin your brand with your prospective partners.
100%. A lot of times whenever I'm pursuing a new customer as a recruiting business, I go right to Glassdoor. And it reminds me of, looking on Yelp for restaurants. It's like, if this is 2.5 stars, I've got nothing. Like I can't bring the family here. Right. And I can't spend my energy trying to recruit and sell someone through it that can just do this quick search and see how things go. So
it all seems so obvious, but yeah.
Well, maybe you can provide a few tips for our HR listeners here. We talked offline, and we talked about how tough it must be of a role right now for the CHRO of Twitter, with Elon Musk, sending out tweets that he's going to lay off 75% of the business. Hopefully that doesn't occur. But how any recommendations on navigating these waters and these uncertain times? And I don't know how you keep people calm at Twitter without a mass exodus there. So
yeah, it's
crystal
funny.
ball, if you have it.
It's I don't know if I'm the guy that gives advice to Elon Musk, but what I will say is I'm a reformed HR leader, right? So you mentioned I graduated, and then at Appletree I had some HR responsibility, and then went into operations for most of my career, and then came back to HR. So the first piece of advice I would give, if you're a people leader, right? We really like the term people versus HR. But if you're a people leader, the first thing you should be doing is focusing on the higher performer folks in your company. When I was with MBNA, they went through kind of a difficult time before the acquisition from Bank of America, and they had a unique approach to kind of downsizing, right sizing, whatever word you want to use, and they went with a more voluntary approach. And so they basically rolled out these voluntary packages based on your severance, based on your tenure and your position. Here's your severance. But the first thing, that hopefully this doesn't sound too arrogant, but one of my managers came to me and said, "Hey, listen, this is not for you. Like, we really think you have a future here. There's a reason why we're doing it, yada, 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 but we really would like and hope you decide to stay. And I mean that sincerely, and here's your career arc, and here's some of the ways we're going to invest in you." So I thought that was a really powerful message. And I thought, wow, if I'm ever in that position, that was a great message, because I ultimately stayed. So really focus on your high performers. I know I said that earlier, but I can't stress that enough. The other thing is communication. It's interesting. You're right. Elon Musk, that got out there. But if you notice what he is doing, he is communicating directly and constantly with the team at Twitter, from what I can read, right? Some of the things that got out. And he basically said that wasn't true, whether it was or wasn't. But he also talked about the company being more of a meritocracy. And that's really what he's trying to create. And what he's sizing up, or what his, kind of assertion is, I think, on that acquisition, is that their culture is not as accountable as it probably should be.
Okay.
And so the interesting thing about that is, if you're a person that works at Twitter or anywhere, and you're looking around and you're going, wow, like, this is frustrating. There's a lot of people here that shouldn't be here because they're not performing. And by the way, number one frustration from team members, employees, is non-performers staying around, right? So accountability is huge for people. And you're looking around and going, like, what gives? That's going to appeal to you, right? So in a way, while it may seem kind of odd that, like, wow, you're right, on the surface, it could cause a lot of panic. But if you're competent and you're a top performer, ironically, that's going to be music to your ears. And, a lot of the things we talk about in scaling up is, I do think we may have overhired post-pandemic. We were flush with cash, hired a lot of people, but did we hire people? And then what happens now? It's so hard to hire people. Now it's like, are we paying them? Well, if you get a top performer, pay them, right? Because they're worth their weight in gold. We've all seen that. I always laugh when people ask me, like, "Hey, what do you think, Kevin? Like, what do you think it costs to replace the turnover?" And I usually say, well, what do you think it costs? And usually people say anywhere from 6 months to a year of salary. And I go, okay, well, like if it's half that, are you still concerned? They're like, yeah. And I'm like, if it's double that, are you still concerned? Yeah. Well, so it doesn't matter, right? It's a lot of money. And your job is to commit to turnover. So if you're filling a role and you're confident you have a great process on talent attraction, don't quibble over comp. Hire that person, pay them what they're worth, and bring them in. And then work really, really hard to keep those people around that. So that would be my advice to HR leaders is maybe it's, I don't want to find the right people and pay them more versus a bunch of people at, market rate.
Great feedback. That's very interesting. And, and you're absolutely right. There's been some topics going around being in sales about, capped comp plans and, there's
why?
Why? It's crazy, right? Or clawbacks or things like that. Just things that just frustrate your top performers that brought in millions of dollars. They're the rainmakers for the orgs, and
you know what you do when you do stuff like that, Dan? I get it. Like what happens typically, because I've seen these, I've done investigation, is somebody like beats the system, right? Mm-hmm. Somebody signs up a bunch of deals and the customer cancels the contract 3 months later, and like whatever. So you go, oh, this can't happen again. So we call this the 2% rule. And so what you're now doing is you're putting a rule or a policy into place that's going to like stop the 2% of people from gaming the system or having this loophole. Well, why don't you just stick to your values? Clearly, if that's the case and the person did it on purpose, they're gone.
Mm-hmm.
But don't, excuse my language, piss off 98%, especially your top performers, to try and stop the 2%. It's like investing in a $10 million security system to stop $1,000 worth of theft. Like, just hire better people and trust your process and find more people that don't do that. And I know that seems like I'm sure there are people leaders that are listening to this and going, you're way, way off. And I just feel like we don't follow the 80-20 rule. 80% of our time with our top performers, 20 with our low, and we invert it. And when you make a policy like that, I feel like you're catering to that lowest common performer. And to your point, you're gonna inhibit your rainmakers who are gonna go, why am I sticking around for this? Like, this makes no sense. I don't do this.
I totally agree with you. It's a relationship. It's like what you said at MBA America. Leadership pulled you aside and said, we see you going on this career arc. We don't want you to take this. This is what it looks like in the future. And essentially, we've got your back. And, and then having my 17 years in sales, I've been in that other side of the scenario multiple times where we hit that 2% and break a comp plan. And, and then they change something on purpose and you're looking at it and you're like, how can I ever trust you? It's a relationship. And it's not even, it's like the principle of it that I can't trust you because now you can change anything, so.
And again, change, if you explain it, people get.
Mm-hmm.
Change because an anomaly happened or someone took advantage or like people just don't get that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, you're taking money out of someone's pocket, an individual's pocket, and there's no way for them to win. They have to either leave or fight, and it's a lose-lose, and it destroys a brand internally.
Yep. Agreed.
Last question for you, and then we can finish up here. This has been great. Tips and tricks over the years. You've had an incredible run and experience in human resources and operations, and any non-traditional things you can leave with the listeners.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to sound like a commercial, but it's really not. And it's just have a system or process your organization. And obviously we talked about scaling up, but there's others out there, but have something that takes the translation of the CEO or the strategist's strategy. So the person that's responsible for the strategy, typically the CEO or the entrepreneur of the growth company, and have a system and process where that can be communicated to all the team members. B, they know what their role in that is. C, it's measurable. And D, it can be executed. We love to use sports analogies because most people get them. But I also use the analogy of making a movie or a TV show, right? You have a script, it gets handed out, and there's various players. There's actors, actresses, there's prop people. There's the people that grips, I don't know what they do, but like they do something on a movie set. There's even the people that cater lunch. But everybody there, no matter what their role in the production of that movie, knows the role and knows what the outcome is, which is to produce a successful film. And in sports, it's the same way. You got a football team, we're going to win the game. We're going to either be a defensive team or an offensive team, the line, the wide receivers, everybody knows what to do. The same should apply to a business. And we're fond of calling a business a team, not a family. And some people do that. That might work for your culture, but a team, because in a team, look, there are trades, there are cuts, things happen, but a team also has this bond together that can overcome some of those challenges. And the team has a common shared goal, and they celebrate their wins together. So it's really have a system and a process in place to fuel your growth.
Fantastic. This has been extremely beneficial for my listeners. Great knowledge that you provided here. Thank you so much for taking the time, Kevin. For anyone that's listening, Scaling Up, Kevin O'Connor, reach out to him. Obviously, he knows what he's doing and can really help your organization take on and get to that next level. I'm Dan Steindler with CCR Search. And Kevin, thanks again for joining us today.
Thanks, Dan. Happy to be here.
Take care.